On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome inside episode 429 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan, recording from my new studio, still under construction in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains on what we think is an Ottawa Senators game day. The Sens are scheduled to host the Los Angeles Kings tonight in a stretch where they've lost 5 straight and 8 of their last 9 games, but with Matt Murray and Alex Formenton, the latest to enter the NHL's COVID protocol, all bets are off. There's now 8 players, plus associate coach Jack Capuano, who are unavailable for tonight's game. So we'll get into who could replace those guys in the lineup and if it's really a fair game. Plus, a look at the Los Angeles Kings, who have started slow and then really picked it up. A very intriguing matchup for Ottawa because these two organizations have a similar rebuilding timeline. So who's ahead? We'll get into all that and more. This is the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day. Today is Thursday, November 11th. Lest we forget, thank you to everyone in the military for their service on a day we remember the sacrifices through 2 world wars and their continued service for our country. Pilsy, we've got a great story to share about one-eyed Frank McGee later on in the show, but the big news in Senators land today is the COVID list continues to grow.
Yeah, it's something that you hate to see, and it's unfortunate. And just before we head into that, everyone, it's November 11th, Remembrance Day. So take some time to reflect, remember, respect all the men and women that were a part of the military and have sacrificed their lives, and men and women that continue to be a part of the service and do amazing things for our country and around the world. So just want to definitely touch on that and make sure you're kind of using this day to properly respect all the members of the military. So definitely that's important here.
You know what, Pilsy? It's unfortunate. I mean, this is just time and how it works, of course. But when we were growing up, you would have World War II veterans come in and speak to the school. You'd remember the assemblies and all that. But just based on the timeline, there's fewer and fewer each year. So I'd really like everyone to go at least hit a Google search and read someone's story, because there are so many, far too many stories that the war has torn apart families and that sort of thing, and all for the freedom that we get to enjoy today. So we definitely have to start the show off with that. We said we're going to end off with a little story about Frank McGee.
What a story.
Wow. Away in World War I, an Ottawa hockey legend. But Pilsy, speaking of hockey in Ottawa, the Senators, are they going to play tonight?
I mean, all signs point to them playing tonight. I don't think if the NHL was going to be clear if they weren't going to play, I think the decision would have already been announced. And the Senators are making all precautions to go ahead with this game, as they've called up more players from Belleville roster to just have enough guys to make an NHL roster here. And yeah, it's kind of a reminder too that although things are definitely much better as far as the COVID world is, things are still very much, it's a serious pandemic that is still going on. It's even with all these players are vaccinated. That's the crazy thing too, right? So you have to remember you got to be doing what you can to stay safe, to make sure you're keeping others safe and things like that. But at a point like this, Ross, like, I don't know, like, I'm not an expert. We pretend to be doctors once in a while, but we always state that we are not doctors and we don't know what's going on. So I'll just say that again. I'm not a doctor. I don't fully understand the situation. Yeah, officially not a doctor, confirmed. So if the NHL feels like they're going through the proper protocols, if they feel like they aren't endangering more players, coaches, staff, fans, etc., then I guess we have to take them at their word and expect that they are going through all the precautions and that this game will be going forward safely. Now, is that true, or what are they doing to make sure that that's the case? I'm not sure. I don't really know what to say in this regard, Ross, because the San Jose Sharks, they've gone through something similar where I think 7 players were on the COVID protocol list and they went ahead with their games. Not saying that is okay and that's the precedent we're using here. I'm just saying clearly the NHL must feel like it's not too dangerous or too much of a risk to keep the game going. Otherwise, they would have canceled it. That's just the way I'm looking at it here.
Well, those Sharks players that you mentioned, it is precedent because 7 San Jose Sharks, 8 Ottawa Senators right now, we're in the COVID protocol. And with the Sharks, guys are still on it, like Erik Karlsson, among others. So with that being said, that game was postponed by 30 minutes when the Jets were in San Jose. Not sure if they were just waiting on tests, whatever it was. Not to make light of this situation. It is serious. However, that was an in-conference game. The fact that the travel and how do you reschedule, I mean, it's an extra headache that shouldn't come before public health. But that being said, the logistics of it, they've already played Montreal and Toronto. Ottawa's their final stop on this 3-game trip through northeastern Canada. So I think all signs point, for me at least, that this game will go underway. DJ Smith has already announced the starting goalie. So I think that as long as we're not going to see more cases throughout the day, this is the current Senators COVID list. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, you can subscribe wherever you download your podcast as well. So I'll do that just for the audio listeners. It's Austin Watson, who was the first to go on the list. Doesn't mean that he's the reason why COVID perpetuated this team.
Definitely.
Penetrated this team, I should say. Connor Brown, Dylan Gambrell, Alex Formenton. Those are the forwards. On defense, Nick Holden, Victor Mete, and Josh Brown. And then Matt Murray, the latest. And we didn't add Jack Capuano in here, but of course, Senators associate coach Jack Capuano also in protocol. And the worst part is here, Pilsy, DJ Smith just announced that everyone who's in the protocol has some sort of symptoms. There is no asymptomatic cases.
For 10 days at least.
So 10 days at least. Pretty concerning stuff here when you look at not only the quality of some of the players that are out, but just the fact that it's been broken through so many different vaccinated individuals. I think that is of concern, no doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, like, where does it end? I think that's a concern that a lot of people on Twitter are calling for this game to get postponed because, like, how does it stop, right? Like, even Ross, we talked yesterday when we saw that Victor Mete was placed in protocol. Well, we know Alex Formenton lives with Victor Mete, so how is there a divide there? And clearly that is an issue because now Alex Formenton is on that list. Again, I want to preface this by saying we're not holding any of these players at fault or like nothing like that, right? Like, we're not trying to say that they were being irresponsible or reckless or anything like that. As we know, with the COVID world, you can be doing everything you can to be safe and just going about your normal life, not really doing anything in excess or anything like that. And you can still get this disease. So we're not trying to say anyone is at fault here, but that's the thing. Like, each day it seems like a new person is being added. And then even I know some fans are throwing it out there kind of tongue in cheek, but think about Alex Formenton and his fight with who was
Connor
that?
Clifton.
Connor Clifton. Like, they're nose to nose.
Josh Brown,
quite literally.
Trent Frederick through the ice.
Yeah, but I mean, the Formenton one, really, like, if you're looking at COVID protocol and social distancing and making sure you're not breathing on each other, those two were clearly breathing on each other, right? Yeah. So, and again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know if that means that now Clifton needs to be in protocol. I don't know how that works. So all I can really say is that it seems like the NHL is okay with moving forward, and hopefully all the precautions are being in place and no more players, coaches, or staff end up on the protocol list.
So DJ Smith was asked about that, future games and postponements, and all he said is, quote, "All I can do is coach." Seems like he's got his hands tied. He's also, along with Zach Burke, the two, the goalie coach, and DJ Smith, of course, the head coach of the Ottawa Senators, are staying in hotels right now because they have young kids at home. And you look at Victor Mete and Josh Brown, both of them had to drive back from Boston to Ottawa, could not be on the Senators team flight. Now, where it gets a little sticky for me is if Victor Mete was in protocol, why was Alex Formenton allowed to play? They're roommates. Like, if they live together, you would expect them to be a close contact no matter what.
Yeah, and I agree with that logical sentiment. But again, you got to think that the NHL has these protocols and systems in place that they think are effective, and whether or not they work, I don't know. But this is like, we're at 8 players and a coach here. Like that's like half a roster, like pretty close there. Like more than half the decor is out now. That your starting goalie is out. A bunch of your forwards are out. Like, I don't know. It's concerning, but I'm not sure what the solution is.
The solution, it seems, is to go along with the game. So we'll have a preview of that coming up with an asterisk, of course, that this game does go on. And if it goes on, I'm going to have a chance at continuing my dominance. I'm calling it dominance. Some might call it luck, but I called that.
Hey, take your wins when you can get them, Ross, in the sports gambling world. Let me tell you that. So you take this one.
Exactly. So no Pilsey's parlay of the day, but I've got a Levy lock, and it's presented by Bet Online, the number one sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. And because you, yes, you driving right now, are a listener of the Locked On Senators podcast, you're entitled to a 50% welcome bonus, not 15, 50 burger percent welcome bonus. You'll love to see it. Get on it right now. Just use our promo code. It's that easy. Promo code Locked On gets you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Now, are you ready for the Levy lock? It is Tim Stützle to score a goal. His first of the year. You can get that right now at plus 200 odds. I'm also going to sprinkle a little bit on Timmy 2 points. You can get him at 2+ points at plus 619 odds. So I'm trying to one up myself. I had Zach Sanford plus 500 to score in the last game. And now Timmy, against the team that passed on him, second overall, he's going to light him up with a 2-point night at plus 619. You can get those odds at betonline.ag. So don't sit on the sidelines. Get into the action. And don't forget the promo code Locked On to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. It's Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Pilsy. So the Ottawa Senators limp into tonight's game. Losers of 5 straight, 1-7-1 in their last 9 games. What are you hoping to see back on home ice as they start a 3-game homestand? That, no pressure, but they've got to get at least 2 wins here.
Yeah, you would think. Yeah. And man, Ross, there's been at least 2 or 3 games this year where we're like, the Senators need to take advantage of down and out opponents. Well, the tables have turned. The Senators are now those down and out opponents for the LA Kings. And this was a game really that you're looking at the schedule, and you mentioned it off the top, these are 2 teams in similar positions as regards to rebuild goes. And this is finally where you're like, oh, this is a team that's in our weight class. Like we can hang them with these guys, or at least we should be able to. And the Kings are, I wouldn't say down and out, but they have injury concerns as well. No Drew Doughty, that's a big deal. And then
Sean Walker's good.
Sean Walker, no Victor Arvidsson. Like this LA Kings team, Ross, their decor is even worse, much worse than the Ottawa Senators, I would say. Like Oli Mata is probably their top guy there.
They also haven't allowed more than 2 goals in a game since October 28th, the span of 6 games.
That's good goaltending.
And they haven't lost in that span either. So what a case study here, Pilsy, because they won their first game of the year 6-2, and then they lost 6 straight games. They were 1-5-1 after 7 games, and now they've just hummed off 6 straight wins. You know what the asterisk is there, though, Pilsy?
They beat the Leafs.
And they beat the Habs twice.
Yeah, twice. There you go.
Yeah,
that's easy.
One on home ice and the Dano show, right? So that's a player that Ottawa's got to watch. We'll get to our lookout Locked On players a little later on. But do the Sens, like, obviously the power play is the first thing that comes to mind for me. 1 of their last 19, 0 for 6 against Boston. If they don't score on the power play tonight, they're not going to win this game.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, and especially with that weak decor like we talked about. And not having Doughty, Doughty's got to kill penalties, right? Like he's a big part of that penalty killing.
He's out 8 weeks, eh?
Yeah, he's out for a while here. But Jonathan Quick has kind of picked things back up again where he left off. He's been having a real good season here. They're kind of at a transition point where they're handing the torch over to Cal Peterson, but Quick is like, nah, let me get that back. It's not quite Cal Peterson time yet.
Because he catches the wrong way.
Yeah, you don't want that. But so definitely the power play is going to have to get going here. I think if we're getting into keys of the game, Ross, I'm going to say aggressive forechecks because like I mentioned, weak decor. Make sure if like, I want to see this team dump and chase a little bit more. Now, obviously, the analytical community is probably rolling their eyes at that, but this is a team where DJ Smith has these guys playing hard. We've seen them forecheck aggressively in the past, and it's worked for them. Like, that's a way they can win games. So I want to see them get back to this, especially with this decor, try to take advantage of it and get the puck in there, get it back, and cycle it around. Just try to stay in the O-zone and tire these defensemen out. Like, they're going to have a hard time containing the top six for the Ottawa Senators if they're able to cycle the puck in the O-zone and really try to tire these guys out.
I think the only name that's very familiar on the back end right now for the Kings, well, there's two of them, but one of them not because he's really anything special. One is Alex Edler, the longtime Vancouver Canuck, who's 37 years old?
He's on the back end of his career, though.
He's on the 19th hole if he's playing around a golf, right? He just left Vancouver. They wanted to move in a younger direction. And then the other one is Oli Mata. You remember Bobby Ryan burning him in game one of the Eastern Conference Final back 100,000 years ago in 2017. But other than that, they've got a young decor. Matt Roy, Mikey Anderson, Cale Clegg, and Tobias Bjornfoot. That's what they're rolling with right now if you're the LA Kings. So you're right. Put pressure on those guys. And much like the Ottawa decor, Pilsy, not a whole lot of offense coming from that back end. No. Drew Doughty, when he got hurt, had 7 points in 4 games, including 1 goal. That's the only goal scored by a Kings defenseman this year, just like Ottawa has 1 goal from their decor. Zaitsev and Doughty, 2 peas in a pot. Yeah, but you look at, other than that, that's a real point of pressure. So especially now, like, who's running the power play for the LA Kings up top? Like,
I'll tell you.
Yeah,
I got their lines here. And just quickly, with Bjornfoot, that's the guy that Jake Evans absolutely embarrassed on that goal. Mm-hmm. He went inside and out twice on him and then shelved it. I mean, no offense, Jake Evans, that's not really a guy you're expecting to see pull off those kinds of moves. So if he can do that, other Senators players need to be able to do that as well. Now, I've got the lines here, courtesy of Daily Faceoff. First power play unit, you got Dustin Brown, Kopitar, and Kempe. And then you got Alex Iafallo on the point. I think that's interesting.
Good player.
Yeah, really good player. And then Cale Clegg. I don't really know much about him, so that'll be interesting to check him out.
He was a World Junior guy at one point.
Yeah, and then this second unit, I don't know. Rasmus Kupari.
Actually, good player.
Not sure who that is. I never heard of him.
Young player. I think he's a top 2-round pick, but good player.
Okay, so this is the Kings rebuild coming to light here. And then Philip Deneau, a guy who is known for playing defensively and not scoring goals, is on the second power play unit. Thanasiu, and then you got Matt Roy. And this guy, I'm going to be very interested to watch, Arthur Kaliev. Yes. So there's your 2 power play units. So really, you should be able to stop those units, right? Like, let's be real here.
Yeah, the one thing that the Los Angeles Kings did that you wished Ottawa had done in their rebuild was keep the big horses, right? Like Dustin Brown, who's made a resurgence. People laughed at him for a little while when he got the C stripped off him and come see, come sa. But you look at what he brings offensively. He's right back producing for the Los Angeles Kings. And of course, the crown jewel, no pun intended, is Anze Kopitar, a complete star. And I'm still not over the Sens passing on him for Brian Lee in 2005. My God. Anze Kopitar, 15 points in 13 games to start this year. He averages 21 and a half minutes per game. If you go a little further down, Alex Iafallo, 13 points in 13 games. He's at a point per game. Other than that, 8 points in 13 is the next highest. So not an offensive juggernaut, but you mentioned it, Pilsy. They have been getting fantastic goaltending, and that's something the Senators are really going to have to key in on if they want any chance of winning tonight's game against a team that's won 6 straight games. Jonathan Quick comes in with a .924 save percentage. That's impressive for the wily vet. So Ottawa, they're in tough tonight, and not the least of their concerns is who they're putting out on the ice as we pull up
their lines.
The Senators' expected line combinations tonight against the Los Angeles Kings. If you're listening, it goes like this. Norris between Tkachuk and Sanford. Paul stays between Stützle and Drake Batherson, so no changes to the top 6 against Boston. But then Ennis goes from left wing to right wing to replace Alex Formenton. On the third line, it's Tierney between Ennis, and Igor moves up a line to play with a little more skill. I'm excited to see how Igor and Ennis can get together. Ennis great at creating space, has that patented spin move, trying to be Tyler Ennis, the basketball player, it seems, at some points. And then the fourth line is a line, and it has Logan Shaw between Parker Kelly and Scott Sabourin. I guess if we see, do you remember, not to get way off track, I guess that's kind of what we do. Do you remember the line brawl that the LA Kings and the Ottawa Senators had back? I want to say it was 2003, 2004. I was right, I think, before you jumped on the wagon, but
I don't remember that one.
Classic fight between Yanni Herme and I want to say, it was Felix Potvin that he fought right at the Senators bench. And while you're speaking next, I'll pull up a photo of it. But there's an iconic photo. Yanni Herme couldn't get his glove off.
Yeah.
And he's holding it on the bench, and there's 5 or 6 guys that are trying to help him get his glove off. They finally do. And then he throws about 8 or 9 punches right into the helmet of Potvin. So I don't know why you take off the glove for that. But anyways, we'll get back to that. For the Sens lineup, however, on defense, there's 2 changes, right? And I mean, they're changes for sure. Or no, Delzato did play last game.
Just one change. Yep.
He's moving from left to right to replace Mete. So the top unit stays the same. Shabbat Zaitsev, Brandstrom, Zub. And then Dylan Hetherington will make his Senators debut. It's his 12th NHL game. The big Western boy, 6'4", 220 pounds. He'll play alongside Michael Delzato. And Philip Gustafson will get the start in goal. So we will
with
see.
Whose equipment?
Yeah, hopefully his own. Now the Senators have returned home. Maybe the bus from Laval had to stop by, drop it off. I don't know what happened to Gus's gear, but that's a mystery to solve another day. Pilsy, what do you think about the Sens lineup here going into tonight's game?
Well, I mean, you make do with what you have, right? I think this is a good way to set it up. I like Sokolov bumping up onto that third line, even though I said a fourth line is a good spot for him. But in this scenario, I want Sokolov on that third line ahead of Sabourin. I can tell you that much for sure. And then that fourth line, like, that's going to bring some physicality, some energy. I've liked the Senators' fourth line almost all year. No matter who's been on it, they've been playing their role. They haven't been letting egregious mistakes get by. They've been playing physical with some up-tempo, even getting some zone time as well. So that's good. And I want to see Sokolov with the chance to get some space to shoot it. Like, let's see a classic Sharkalov wrist shot from the circle or something like that to get him going. I think that'll really help his confidence there. And then Hetherington, that's a guy I said that the Senators, they need veteran fringe NHL, AHL defensemen, and he is that guy for them right now.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, only 11 games though, so I would have liked someone with a little more experience, but you got to take what you got, and it's going to be interesting to see him play beside Delzato. Hopefully they don't get too much ice time here. I think that might be a little dangerous, but then the weight shifts to Brandstrom. Like, Brandstrom, similar to last season, Ross, right? At the end of the year, like, he really only is getting his shot when it's absolutely necessary, but you need to take advantage of these opportunities, and this is his time to shine. So hopefully they get some power plays like they did up against Boston. He gets some time quarterbacking that second power play unit. He gets some touches on the puck, and hopefully instead of getting absolutely hammered 5 times, let's maybe keep it down to 3 times getting absolutely destroyed out there on the ice.
All right, so that's how the Senators lineup looks in tonight's game. Just to get back to the conversation from that line brawl, here's a still photo. Jan Irme and Felix Potvin going head to head. I actually love those Bauer reactor pads that Irme's got. Any Sens goalie that puts a little bit of gold in their pad is good in my books. I think it's an important, it brings out the shine from the logo, I think. So as just a little piece, I love that.
There's another story kind of similar. I saw on this day 25 years ago, Potvin and Ron Hextall had their famous fight. Oh my God. Goalie friendly show. You got to watch that fight. Like, that is like peak goalie fight there. Hextall and Potvin just throwing haymakers, and Hextall skating all the way down the ice just enraged. Like, if I'm Felix Potvin, I'm skating to the bench and running into the dressing room after seeing Hextall come with that kind of rage.
There's a YouTube video called Ron Hextall Violence.
Oh, it's like 10 minutes of just his highlights. Yeah. I've watched that at least 10 times. Like, that's one of my favorites of all times. It's so good. Yeah.
Well, follow us on Twitter at Sens Central, and we're going to tweet out with this episode. We'll put a thread, and we're going to put the video of the entire clip of the Kings Senators brawl from back in, I'm going to say 2004 until proven otherwise. 2001, December 20th. Everyone was in the holiday spirit, and shocker, Chris Neal started the whole thing. So
Of
that's
course.
no surprise there. The both teams combined for 174 penalty minutes only in that brawl in the second period. It was wild. And the Senators, damn it, they lost that game 4-2. In total in that game, Pilsy, 248 penalty minutes were handed out. So,
damn, I hope they had the expanded penalty boxes for that one. Jeez.
I know, right? Anyways, that game was in Ottawa. It was an absolute classic. So go check that out. We'll tweet it at Sens Central. All right, let's get into our locked on player of the game tonight, Pilsy. Who do you have?
Locked on. I think I'm going to go Sokolov with this one because he only had about 7.5 minutes, only like 5.5 minutes of even strength time. DJ Smith even said it himself, just the way the flow of the game was going. He wasn't able to get that line on as much as he wanted. He wanted to see a little bit more of Sokolov. Now Sokolov has had a practice time, right? Like they're on the ice now, aren't they? So he's had time. Yeah, they are. So he's had time to get used to that second power play unit. So hopefully that'll help him out there. And yeah, I want to see Sokolov get at least one nice patented wrist shot. Like that's what I'm going to be looking for here for Sokolov.
Oh, just to go back, sir, I'm still reading on that brawl. Friend of the show. We got to get him back on now that we're on YouTube and have a little bit more of a following. But Andre Waugh was actually the one who started that fight, chirping at the Kings bench, as one does. That guy is absolutely such a beauty. He started punching Felix Potvin. That's how it all started. Remember, he's got a thing with goalies. What did he do in his shootout?
He's the only player ever to start a fight in a shootout with the goalie, I think it was, if I remember correctly. And then it turned into a line brawl and a shootout. Like, there's not even like active game going on, and this happened. So yeah, that was a wild story. If you guys haven't listened to that interview, that's one of our all-time interviews because he is such a storyteller. It was awesome.
We'll get Andre Waugh back on the show here in the next little while. So that aside, my locked on player tonight, we're going to go with Tim Stützle. Yeah. And I know it's an easy one. And yeah, sometimes people skip the ads. Not today. Go listen to Bet Online. I got some locks for you. And one of them has to be Timmy scoring a goal. He's got one goal in how many? I need this full number. One goal in 33 games at the Canadian Tire Center.
And it was so long ago. Like, it wasn't like it was like midway through last season. It was the game against the Leafs near the start of the season.
I know. And you look at that, still one more home goal than Quinton Byfield has, as he has no NHL goals, only 6 games. But people knew that he would take a little longer to develop the big, rangy centerman who unfortunately fractured his ankle while he was having a good preseason. So he's out long term, but my locked on player has to be Tim Stützle. You know, he's got a little extra something. When we interviewed him, we mentioned it. His buddies were texting like LA bound on his Instagram post. Everyone thought there was the LA connection with the ownership in Los Angeles. Marco Sturm is an assistant coach. Of course, he's of German descent as well. So everything lined up, and then they passed on him. So hopefully we see a game like we always get from Brady when he plays the Montreal Canadiens. And we want a little extra something from Timmy Superstar tonight. Let's see that superstar skill, because he's putting pucks on net, and that's a start. He had 4 shots last game, 3 the game before, and the one before that. So he's going on 10 shots in his last 3 games, but let's get him a little more inside. I think a lot of his shots have been coming a little outside the home plate area. Not like they've been coming from the blue line or on the half wall, but get to the front of the net, cause havoc, and try to get a greasy one. Get a Chris Tierney goal. Have it just hit off of you, get in, and I think the floodgates will open. So no better night than tonight for Tim Stützle to get on the scoreboard. And I'm going to go a step further, Pilsy. He's going to get it on the power play.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it's going to happen on the power play. That's his best chance. And I think if it does happen on the power play, it's going to be because LA Kings penalty killers are going to be focused on stopping that Josh Norris one-timer. So get them all focused and distracted with the Josh Norris one-timer, and then get it over to Timmy for a nice wrist shot top cheese.
Another mention before we move on to my lookout player, and there's a tie in here. Shane Pinto skating with a
Oh.
contact jersey. The X factor of this Ottawa Senators team is their 20-year-old centerman who turns 21 tomorrow, I believe, is his birthday. So
Huge.
if that's the case, tomorrow, November 12th, he will be 21 years old, and the Senators selected him with the first pick in the second round of the 2019 draft. Well, what do you know? The player who was selected with the next pick went to the LA Kings, and he is my lookout player tonight.
He took mine.
Arthur Kaliev. I have to, because the numbers don't necessarily jump out at the NHL level just yet. 4 goals in 13 games, 3 and 12 this year, but he is a dangerous shooter. He is their version of Igor Sokolov. You cannot let him get too much space or he's going to put it in the back of the net. So I just needed to shout him out. We never discussed beforehand who's got who. It's just a crapshoot, Pillsy, and there's no low-hanging fruit today. So I got Arthur Kaliev as my lookout player. Do not give this guy space to operate on the half wall, because he's going to step into a wrister and likely get into the back of the net.
Does he have an NHL goal yet?
He's got 4 of them.
Okay, thank God. So he
scored a goal in his first NHL game, actually, last year, his only game.
I was worried he was going to get his first up against the Sens, so we don't have to worry about that.
I'm sure someone will be able to.
Yeah, so I did have a backup plan, luckily, and this guy, this is one of the guys where, like you said, they're trying to keep some of their main players here for this rebuild. They're not tearing it entirely down, and Alex Iafallo, like, man, this kid is so good. Ross, look at his point streak. An assist, 2 goals, an assist, a goal, an assist, a goal, 2 assists, and a goal. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 game point streak that he is on, and he's been an absolute stud for this team. The game against Montreal, Ross, he played 23 minutes and 20 seconds. So, like, they're not afraid to use this guy. He's going to be someone the Sens are seeing a lot of in this game, I assume. So he's someone I'm going to be looking out for, because he's arguably their biggest scoring threat.
Who do you try to match up against the Kopitar line? Because that is an offensive juggernaut unit, but at the same time, you don't really want to have the Norris line going up against Deneau. So it's almost a pick your poison situation.
Yeah, that's a great question. Especially, it's interesting because that top line is Kempe, Kopitar, and Brown. So very kind of mixed line there. So I think you probably go Nick Paul up against Kopitar, eh? Like, that's probably your most defensive centerman there.
But aren't you kind of limiting Timmy on the wing if you're looking at him going up a defensive role and he's lining up right up against Dustin Brown?
It's true, yeah. But then you start flipping things around. Like you said, you don't want the Norris line going up against him or Deneau.
I don't really want any of these lines going up against Kopitar, honestly.
Honestly, for real. Just get the 4th line out there, see what they can do.
Oh, yeah, sure. Why not? Yeah. Hey, is this a revenge game for Scott Sabrin, though? Originally drafted by the Los Angeles Kings.
I don't know. I guess, yeah, sure. This is definitely a revenge game. With Scott Sabrin, the only revenge game I think of is the Leafs, though, because that's been a rivalry that's tied to him ever since his first game as a Senator.
Yeah, he never ended up playing a game for the Los Angeles Kings, but he was in their organization from 2012 until 2016.
Wow.
So interesting to note that. Although I don't know if he was drafted or signed as a free agent. It's not showing up on HockeyDB if he was actually drafted.
I think he was signed as a free agent. I don't think he was drafted.
Yeah, it must have been after playing under DJ Smith there. Yeah, signed as a free agent out of the Oshawa Generals after winning the Memorial Cup, or did he? Anyways, that's neither here nor there, but it is a revenge game of sorts for Scott Sabrin. Hell, it's a revenge game for everybody right now because they're on a 5-game losing streak, and I really would like to speak about a win tomorrow. How about you?
I mean, that would be great. I can't remember the last time we talked about a win. It's been weeks. So, I mean, or I'm going to try to put a positive spin on this. Or you lose this game, and then you've lost 6 straight, and then you pull a LA Kings, and then you just win the next 6 straight, and it's an even slate, right? So maybe that'll happen.
Let's end this show with a little Nick Paul positivity.
Oh, and we need to get to the One-Eyed Frank story.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. That is very important on a day of remembrance. However, Nick Paul says, quote, "We just come to the rink with a positive attitude, and whatever happens, you go through the procedures and keep going. End of quote.
I mean, it's what else can you do, really? Like, it's like DJ Smith's quote. Like, it sounds kind of like basic and simple-minded, but at the end of the day, like, yeah, DJ's not a doctor. He doesn't know the health, what to do. He's just doing as he's told, and he's just trying to coach this team like it's his job to do. So that's all he can do in this situation, unfortunately.
That's all they can do and hope for the best. Philip Franchise, as we're going to call him now. No.
Philip Franchise?
I'm just playing on the fact that he's got the most under scrutiny nickname, most scrutinized nickname in Senators history.
Well, really, it shouldn't be.
Philip Gustafson, as we'll call him. No, he is 2-2-1 on the season. And what really is impressive with that is the fact, so 2-2-1, but that one loss was tough. I mean, how can you blame him for the one against, or sorry, who went in? Which one am I talking about here? Oh, the Washington game, because that one was way out. It was 4-1 when he got in, right? And then Ottawa makes a comeback. I didn't think he deserved the loss in that game, but even with that, 2-2-1, but he's got a .911 save percentage. So let's see if he can continue his hot play. It's a good extension of what we discussed in the preseason, where if Matt Murray can't go, we wanted to see Gus get games, sure, in Belleville, but when he gets called up, be the starter over Anton Forsberg. Now, we know Forsberg's going through something not COVID related. I wonder if that plays a little in here as well. This situation is completely wild. Like, you look at the guys who are out with injury, Colin White and Shane Pinto, and then the 8 players that are out with COVID. This is about as bare bones of a team as you're going to get for the Ottawa Senators here going forward. So let's see how they can react to that. But before we go, Pilsy, hit us off with this Frank McGee story, and we'll fill in the blanks from there. This is truly remarkable and shows the courage and the drive that these young men had to go and fight for their country.
Absolutely, yeah. Right off the top, let's credit guest of this show, Wayne Scanlon, for his article. This is back in 2019. Maybe we'll tweet out the link so other people can see it.
Absolutely.
I think Wayne has retweeted it as well, but it's a story that even Daniel Alfredson felt compelled that he needed to shed some light on this. And the legendary one-eyed Frank McGee, like, this guy was an absolute stud for the Silver Sevens at the turn of the century. And Ross, in one game, he scored 14 goals. I had to reread that sentence 3 times to make sure it wasn't like in all games against this opponent or in a series against this opponent. No, one single game, 14 goals. Now, you could say what you want about goaltending in the early 1900s from 1903 to 1906. I'm not sure if the butterfly was quite in effect there, but nonetheless, this guy's lighting up, and he got hit with a puck in the eye, and he totally lost all his vision in his left eye, but he was still able to score at a good pace. And his uncle was a father of Confederation, Thomas Darcy McGee. So, like, the history here is very apparent. And he ended up, he was a part of the military, and there was an injury to his knee, like a serious injury, and they were going to let him go home. And he was like, no, never mind that. Like, I'm staying here with my guys. I'm standing up for my country. And what do you need me to do next? And to have that kind of courage, like, man, I think if I was in that situation and I had a serious injury and was offered to go home and just rest and recover, I would probably take that right away. But to get back in the fight, to try to rally the troops and continue to fight for your country and what you believe is right, and to really fight for the freedom, like you mentioned, Ross, that we all are so grateful for today, is an incredible story, and it deserves to be highlighted. So definitely Frank One-Eyed McGee is a legend that we need to remember here.
And the story of how he even got enlisted to service, he had to trick the officer because they wouldn't let someone who was blind in one eye fight. And we're pulling up a photo, famous athlete killed in action. He was the captain of the Ottawa Silver Seven back in the day. And I plan on educating myself further on this. There's a video.
What a handsome guy. Look at that.
Absolutely. Tight turtleneck too. Yeah. That being said, this guy fooled the commanding officer. When they asked him to do the reading test, he covered his blind eye. Then when they asked him to change eyes, he changed hands and covered the same blind eye and fooled them. So what a driven individual and a star that his name needs to be remembered for years to come. Like Frank Finnegan
Absolutely.
has his number retired in Ottawa. It was a nice ode to the past, although now the Sens are just drafting players that want to wear number 8. But he wasn't even a member of the Hall of Fame. Frank McGee was the first ever class of the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1945, right after the Second World War. So a complete class individual. He gave his life defending this country, and he gave a lot of joy to the hockey fans.
And he was only 36, Ross, when he died in service. So that's
think about that. Like most of the guys who went over there were 18 to 25.
Some even younger. Like you mentioned, him tricking the guy enlisting. A lot of like 16, 17-year-olds were able to fake their way onto there, which is crazy to think that they were that willing and eager to go to defend their country. So it's like a whole generation lost, really, which is crazy to think of, all these young men and women that were willing to sacrifice so much for us. So it's days like this where you really need to understand the seriousness and kind of the gravity of the situation, because we're all able to lead really fortunate lives because of the sacrifices these people made.
Lest we forget, and we hope that you take a moment today and remember all those who fought for our freedom. We'll be back tomorrow to discuss maybe a Sens game, maybe not. It's an ongoing situation with 8 Senators plus an associate coach in COVID protocol. You can follow us on Twitter at Sens Central for up-to-the-minute information regarding tonight's game. Thanks so much for listening. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.